Everything you love was once a project. The apps you tap, the bridges you cross, the shows you stream. None of them happened by accident. Behind every one of them was a dream, a team, and a project manager trying to hold it all together. I'm Rick Morris, and this is AI Driven PM, the show where project managers stop playing games, embrace reality, and use AI to make dreams come true without burning out their people. Each week, we'll blend real world project war stories with practical ways to put AI to work. How to plan smarter, negotiate better dates, protect your team, and focus on the work that actually moves the needle. If you ever thought there has to be a better way to do this, then you're in the right place. Let's get to work. This is AI Driven PM. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of AI Driven PM. I'm Rick Morris. I'm here to guide you through everything that's project, product, program management, portfolio management, all of the fun PM words. And today we're going to focus on a little bit of a different P, but it's more of people management side of it. And, we've been talking a lot about AI and it's a very tactical tool. And we've been looking at, charters and how to help it think. But I want to start to show you a little bit of a different side of it. And that's how to help you think maybe some of your coaching issues and start to think through again, ways to help up level how you approach and solve problems with your new thinking partner of AI. And today we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is the halo effect. And if you don't know the halo effect, it's basically it says just because you're good at something, people then assume that you're good at something else. And quite frankly, the way I always like to do this when I'm speaking is one of my favorites. Is I get up on stage, I'll say please everybody in the audience who's a practicing project manager, raise your hand and get everybody to raise their hand. I said, now keep them up. And now, who came out of college wanting to be a project manager? And you see everybody's hands drop, right? There's like 3 or 4 that stay up, and I go, well, that's the halo effect. We were all good at something else. I mean, I started as a technical engineer as well, and found my way into project management. And I think the ones that are actively looking at this podcast or go to the speeches I'm at or the PMI chapters, we fell in love with the profession. We want to stay with it, but that's not something that we like set out to do. And that's essentially kind of the halo effect. We tend to promote really, really good people at a function, assuming that they're going to be a great leader of that function. And it's actually 2 totally different skill sets. I say we were good at something else as project managers, but like I watch a lot of like engineers get promoted to project managers, but then we wonder why, all of a sudden they're not being successful there. Well, it's 2 totally different skill sets. One of the other ones I always like to mention is just because you're a great project manager doesn't mean you're going to be a great PMO leader, right? I see that all the time where, we take our best project manager and make him, a PMO manager, and then they struggle. And the reason being is like I wrote a blog post years ago. I was talking about I called it the kindergartner's guide to PMO, but essentially a project manager has been taught to color inside the lines, and the PMO manager has to actually establish the lines that you color in, and that's 2 totally different skill sets. One is about negotiating ambiguity, while the other one is controlling a project. And where I see some of these failures occur is like just because they were successful doing it a certain way, they feel like that's the only way to do it. I felt like I was very successful as a PMO manager because I let each one of my project managers thrive in their own environment. So I would like say what we needed to do, but not how we needed to do it. And I'd let them come up with the how that they were most comfortable with. Now I had a familiar way that I liked to see it, but that doesn't mean it was the best way. And it didn't mean that my project managers would thrive doing it that way. So for instance, you just say, hey, listen, I need to make sure that we have a good set of meeting notes coming out. Now, if you want to do that in a Word format, if you want to dictate that, if you want to just put that in bullet points in an email, I don't care, as long as we have some sort of meeting notes. And so that would allow them to kind of flex their own ways, but still hit, the targets that I'm looking for. So those are just some examples. So when we start talking about the halo effect, we start, assuming that somebody's excellent at this skill is going to be excellent at this skill, and it just doesn't work that way. For instance, like a great engineer generally has deep focus, technical mastery. They love to solve hard problems. They love to deliver working code or working product or creation of something new. Whereas a great PM really should have broad coordination, some stakeholder fluency, some navigating ambiguity, and managing energy or decisions. And so what I see is, these new PMs will try to apply either the only way they've known how to do it, or maybe engineering rigor to people problems. And then they get frustrated when that doesn't work. That's going to lead me to a whole nother topic around disk and disk profiles, but that's for another day. We won't do that today. But you can see that, like, sometimes I watch great engineers. They've got to be the ones to do it. And so while they delegate and somebody does it, they get frustrated and just do it themselves, and they burn out trying to do everybody else's job. Like, that's some of the things that I see. So what should we look for instead? So what we're really looking for is people that have great pattern recognition across domains, or you're comfortable with some ambiguity and conflicting priorities because you have to work through those. It takes obviously a ton of emotional intelligence. And again, one of my favorite things to say is influence. So, like, I can't, as a PM, I can't make anybody do anything. All I can do is influence, and I can't make a stakeholder change a date or a budget. All I can do is influence the outcome, and that comes with emotional intelligence and learning how to meet people where they are to take them where you need to be. You also need the ability to translate between technical and business language. So what is this going to have to do with AI? Again, I want to start to broaden our horizons. AI is not just for typing out emails or those types of things. It does a really good job at coaching you to coach or preparing you for points. Now, I'll share an uncomfortable truth. When I ran a PMO, I found out I'm not a very good HR manager, and not in the corporate sense. Because I'll give you an example. We were supposed to hit like I think it was 60% of our milestone and production dates was the goal, and we hit like 99% in our first year. Everybody crushed it. I mean, everybody crushed it. And so it was time to do evaluations. We were a brand new PMO. Everybody exceeded expectations, including the expectations of our bosses and my bosses that set our targets. So I gave everybody fives, and HR came up to me and said, "You can't do that." It's like, "Why?" I was like, "That's what happened. Like, this is a rare case." And they're like, no. Somebody has to fall below your expectations. Everybody else can meet, and maybe one person can exceed your expectations. And I thought that was the dumbest thing I've ever heard. So, and when I pushed back on it, they said, "If you don't do this," this is the line that killed me. "If you don't do this, then the problem is your expectations." And my response to that was, "Or it's yours." And they're like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "Well, you want me to forcibly tell somebody that they're not doing their job or just barely meeting their job versus what we're doing right now, which is exceeding all possible expectations and building leaders." Like, I'm not a good HR manager. But I also had a phenomenal HR manager in Kerry Blaze, still one of my best friends. But Kerry, why I found him to be so phenomenal is when we would go into our monthly one-on-ones, or if we would go into our quarterly or our coaching, he had this bullet point list of things he was concerned about, things that he was proud of, and it always impressed me the level of detail that he was able to hold on to. And so I've kind of held on to that at this point, going, I have to have better preparation for coaching people, and AI is now my thinking partner. So that's what we're talking about today, is the halo effect. How do we get people to coach? We're going to look at a couple of non-negotiable experiments, but we're going to use AI today to help assess a PM's skill gaps objectively, and then build a development plan for a new or struggling project manager. So those are going to be our experiments. Of course, we're going to pause right here for a quick break to hear from our sponsor, Centric Consulting, and I'll be back up with the dual screens and some prompts, and we'll get after it.
In today's economy, leaders are looking for a different kind of consulting partner. A partner that will work with you to understand your culture, technology, and employees. A partner that will develop the solutions you need, not the solutions they know best. For us, it's never been about simply checking a box. Since we were founded in 1999, Centric Consulting has established a reputation for solving its clients' toughest problems by delivering flexible, tailored, cost-efficient solutions, all centered on the right outcomes for each business. It's all part of our mission to deliver an unmatched experience you won't get anywhere else. Centered on what's best for you, Centric is ready to guide you on the journey ahead.
Okay, we are back, and you see the screens popped up there. I've got ChatGPT on the left-hand side. I've got Claude on the right-hand side, and we're going to put some prompts in here. The first, and again, really quickly, if you go to pmthatworks.com, that's pmthatworks.com, you'll be able to get these exact prompts. There will be a blog post per episode, and all of the prompts will be there. And then probably at the end of the season, I'll release one that's just all of the prompts. Or we'll probably have some sort of takeaway or something like that will have all of the prompts that we did on AI-driven PM this season. So you're a senior project management coach and assessors. This is the prompt. First, ask me 3 to 5 questions about the PM's background, current role, challenges they're facing, and what success looks like in their context. Remember that we're using Socratic prompting, which means we want AI to be our thinking partner. So when we put something in, we wanted to ask us some clarifying questions, so it makes us think a little bit and generates a better output for us. So once it does the success, then provide an assessment answering what are the 8 to 10 core PM competencies that are needed for this role. Based on what I've shared, which competencies does this PM likely excel at? Which competencies are likely gaps or growth areas? What specific behaviors or outcomes would indicate strength or weakness in each gap area? And what is a 90-day development plan to address the top 2 to 3 gaps? Now, this is the next piece. I of course, will have something generated just for these prompts. But a lot of times, if I'm doing this, I'll ask the PM to give me their background. So tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me what you're comfortable with. Why do you want to be a great PM? What are some of the challenges that you're existing already? So I get a write-up from them. And so I put that underneath the PM background. So now I have a little bit more of a complete picture. So I'm going to put these prompts into both ChatGPT. Right now it's 5.2. We're using Claude Sonnet 4.6, and we're going to see what comes back here. So again, I'm looking for them to ask me questions. So the questions first are, before I assess, I need a little bit more context. So what authority do you formally have as a PM? Can you approve scope changes and push back on the sponsor? How is success measured for you on this project? What's the sponsor's level? So great questions. Now, this is a little bit of a deeper one. I'm not going to be able to play with it as much as I do on some of my episodes. I just want to get this point across as you start to look at AI as a thinking partner, it's more than just tactical deliverables and outputs. It really is thought generation. I have a new methodology that I've written, and it's something I'm really, really excited about. But I had AI do deep research on it. I had AI ask me about 30 or 40 different questions to help frame it. I asked it to go find holes. I asked it to go look at competing methodologies to make sure I'm not close or stealing from anybody, or I read it somewhere else, or you know what I mean? Like I do a lot of this stuff with AI and let it go. Normally throughout my day, I've got AI running research behind the scenes for me, just answering questions and helping me, deliver the kind of the next content that I'm working on. So it's a phenomenal thinking agent for all of those things. So it's asked me a bunch of questions here. Here, PM competency on this side, it's asking me about. It says these are the competencies that matter most for a PM leading a cross-functional product on team, mid-size, stakeholder-heavy project like Social Vision. So scope and change management, stakeholder management, strategic communication, and it goes through, a lot of this stuff. Claude went ahead and built the 90-day plan. So here, what interesting difference between the two. If you watch the last episode, I felt like Claude gave better responses to that specific thing we were doing. And I was telling you that I feel like you've got to play with all the tools because certain ones are good on one area and certain goods are in the other. Well, interestingly enough, with the Claude one, it says, given your background and the context I already have on this project, I have enough to give you a substantive assessment without asking you to repeat yourself. So let me just dive straight in. Well, that's not exactly what I wanted. I still wanted to ask me 3 to 5 questions and go from there. And so here, what ChatGPT did is it did ask me the 5 questions, but it went ahead and started to bring out all of the different plans and everything else, but it'll allow it to shape. So interesting thing there. All right, let's move on to our next prompt. Our next prompt is you're an organizational psychologist specializing in team composition and role fit. Ask me 2 to 3 questions about how PMs are selected and promoted in my organization. Then help me analyze our hiring and promotion patterns by answering this. What skills or background do we tend to prioritize when selecting project managers? What skills critical to project managers' success might we be overlooking? And then what evidence would indicate we're suffering from halo effect in PM selection? How should we change our PM selection criteria to reduce halo effect bias? And what interview questions or assessments would reveal true PM competencies? I love that last question. And then we give it organizational context. Again, I would love for you to be able to put your own organizational context in there, but we're going to drop these in and see what happens as a result. So again, ChatGPT is doing exactly what I asked for. And Claude skipped it again, went right to what he thinks it knows. And that's fine. Again, we can work with these. It's not a bad thing. Just interesting that it's bypassing the Socratic method a little bit there. It says, before I analyze, I need a little clarity. Let's just see if there's any cool stuff that's popped up. It does ask questions, but it already did the ChatGPT output as well. So it says, what skills you tend to prioritize? Your pattern is clear. You prioritize deep product knowledge, technical credibility, system architecture understanding, problem-solving ability, and individual performance reputation. The implicit belief appears to be the best engineer will become the best PM. Now, what's happening here is it's grabbing the context of the chat that I've been using. So that's why it's kind of keeping that in there. I don't know if that's the exactly, the truth, but that's what it tends to be at this point. It says, in a 200-person software company, PM success depends heavily on stakeholder boundary setting, scope governance, executive communication, strategic framing, conflict navigation, cross-functional influence without authority, decision facilitation, and change containment. So really good stuff in terms of just helping you think through things. Let's see a couple of the interview questions that they popped out with. So let's see. You need to tell your executive sponsor that the project will be 3 weeks late. Write the first 3 sentences of that email right now. I think that's pretty interesting. Not a bad one. Scope control. How do you prevent scope creep when priorities change weekly? Executive communication. Give them a roadmap and say, explain this roadmap to a non-technical executive in 2 minutes. Interesting. So again, what you're trying to do, what you're trying to go after, utilize it as a thinking partner so it can help you frame great questions, frame great ideas, take something that you started off and give you just that enough oomph or tweak that it takes you to the next level. All right, we always try to do 3 prompts. I'll do one more here. It says, you are a PMO director building a competency framework. First, ask me 3 to 4 questions about our project types, organizational culture, and what great PM performance looks like here. Then create a PM competency framework answering what are the 8 to 12 core PM competencies for our context. For each competency, what is developing, proficient, and expert look like in observable behaviors? Great question. What competencies are most critical for new PMs versus senior PMs? How should we assess these competencies in hiring and promotion decisions? And what development resources, training, coaching, mentoring, support growth in each area? And then I gave it a little bit of an organizational context to put in here. We'll drop these prompts in and we'll see if anything cool pops up. I like here where it's asking, ChatGPT is asking, where do projects fail most often? Is it alignment, scope churn, quality, missed timelines, or weak adoption? But that's a pretty good one. So it says observable behavior levels. So strategic alignment, executive communication, shares update focused on tasks, struggles to translate technical detail is somebody who's developing, somebody who's proficient, can frame work in terms of outcomes, timelines, and risks. And they pre-align executives before major decisions. Fantastic. Expert shapes priorities before execution begins, anticipates executive concerns and addresses them early, and then reduces rework caused by shifting direction. So some really, again, fantastic ways. So maybe you're a new PMO manager. Maybe like me, you were just kind of thrown into the role, and now you're given these three levels: a PM1, a PM2, and a PM3, and they start asking you for job descriptions and how do we measure them, and what's going to be the promotion path, and all those different things. I think it's really, really important that you utilize something like AI to help you frame that, especially if you're relatively new into that coaching world. So just to wrap up here, halo effect is generally, again, means just because somebody's good at something, we assume that they're good at something else. And that's not always the case. A great engineer doesn't necessarily always make a great PM, or a great PM doesn't necessarily always make a great PMO manager. They're different skill sets. And we need objective competency frameworks. And we need ways in order to delineate and help build career paths. And I just wanted to expose that your AI thinking partner can be fantastic sources of information to help you get there. Your non-negotiable experiment for this episode is to run the PM skills gap analysis on yourself or on a project manager on your team, and then identify the top two gaps and one concrete action to address each. So I'd like you to be honest with yourself, have a great conversation with it, where you think you're strong, where you think you're not strong. Ask it to ask you questions to help formulate more of that response, so that you can find two gaps that are really, really powerful. What I want you to notice is what were the gaps that you expected, and what did AI surface? Did they surface any blind spots that you weren't quite anticipating? And how does having a structured development plan change that conversation? Those are questions I'd love for you to answer. Next time, we're going to talk a little bit more skill set. We're going to talk about people skills versus domain expertise, and which one actually matters for project managers. So hopefully you'll join us for the next episode. This has been AI Driven PM. My name is Rick Morris. I'll see you again soon. I'm Rick Morris, and this has been AI Driven PM. Keep protecting your people, telling the truth, and making dreams come true.